All right, so today for language arts, we'll be reading chapter 21 of Bearstone. And I'm going to give us a little bit of a rundown of what we'll be doing for this week. So today we'll be reading chapter 21. Tomorrow on Tuesday, we'll be reading chapter 22. Then Wednesday, we are going to have a review because chapter 22 is the last chapter of the book. So on Wednesday, we will have a review. And then Thursday will be our final exam on Bearstone. And then on Friday, we will be introducing our Bearstone final project. So this week in Language Arts, we'll be reading the final 2 chapters of Bearstone, reviewing Bearstone, taking the final exam, and starting our Bearstone project. But today we'll be reading chapter 21. And just like last week, you can either watch the Ed puzzle and answer the questions in the Ed puzzle, or you can read the chapter by yourself and answer the focus questions by yourself. So you don't have to do both. If you watch this Ed puzzle and answer the questions, you do not have to submit the chapter 21 focus questions. All right, so let's get started. We'll be starting off right here where it says Cloyd wasn't allowed to see the old man. Actually, before we start, let's do a little bit of a rundown of what happened at the end of chapter 20. So we know that Cloyd found Walter at the end of the tunnel in the mine, and Walter was covered with a bunch of rubble. And Cloyd had to make one of the 2 decisions on how to get Walter help. So he went down and caught the helicopter, but everybody in the helicopter was wondering, how did Cloyd know that it was going to be there? Because they don't remember, and they don't remember seeing him watching Rusty kill the bear. Cloyd was kind of hiding when that happened. All right, so let's start right here where it says Cloyd wasn't allowed. Cloyd wasn't allowed to see the old man. He came to the hospital every day and waited, but they wouldn't let him in yet. He took the Bearstone out of his pocket and asked the nurse to put it by Walter. She said she would put it right by his nightstand where he would see it. Walter's brother was there, from the ranch down in Aztec, and so were his sisters-in-laws from Missouri. They got to see him first. Finally, Cloyd was allowed in. Half of Walter's face was bandaged, and his leg was in a cast that was held off the bed a little with a pulley. He smiled painfully when he saw Cloyd and beckoned him over. "I'm gonna make it, Cloyd," he said. "They can't kill this old hoss." Cloyd didn't say anything. He didn't know what to do. We're at the top of page 143. He just stood by the old man. Walter rolled his eyes toward the nightstand. "I sure appreciate seeing that blue bear of yours." Cloyd looked at the Bearstone in a new way. He'd been wishing, ever since he'd been to the top of the mountain, that he could find a way to show the old man how he felt about him. Now Cloyd knew what to do. He would give the old man his greatest treasure. "I want you to have it," Cloyd said, pointing to the Bearstone with a twist of his lips. The old man tried to hitch himself up in his bed. "Now wait a minute here. That's..." Cloyd's eyes met Walter's. He wanted the old man to understand how grateful he was. "I want you to keep it," he said. Walter saw into Cloyd's dark eyes and felt the strength and conviction of a man, not a boy. He was greatly humbled to receive such a token of affection, and at his age, this was a particular sort of joy he'd never felt in his whole life. He reached over to the nightstand and took the turquoise bear in his fingers. "I'll always treasure this piece. I surely will." A tear escaped the old man's eye. "I think of you every time I see it." For a while, Walter couldn't speak. "Now then," he said finally, "you and me have a lot of catching up to do. I heard about what you did, how you rode that blue horse up to the divide and got me that helicopter. Nobody else could have done that as much as Cloyd." With a quick smile, Cloyd said, "You would have done the same for me." And then it was time to go. Walter could only have short visits. It was September, and school was starting. Cloyd came after school to see the old man and talk for a while, and then the nurses let him come early in the morning as well. Walter was going to be in the hospital a long time. Cloyd could see how he really needed company. He told Walter about how school was much better than before, how he was going to learn how to read. His house mother got the school to give him a teacher all to himself for one period a day, since he was going to try. A few weeks passed, and the old man seemed to be getting worse instead of better. Cloyd didn't know why. He was there when Walter's sister-in-laws were saying goodbye, and then he found out something the old man had known, or the old man had known for a while, but hadn't told him. "You won't mind it so bad, Walter," she said kindly. "You just can't manage on your own. If I could come and live at the farm, that would be another thing. But I have my own family back home." "I wouldn't ask you to, Etta," Walter said. So Etta must be Walter's sister. "Well, I know you wouldn't have that, and Tom has his own ranch to keep up with." The old man was looking through the window at the yellow leaves blowing from the trees, and he let out a sigh. His sister-in-law took his hand. "It's time to come in from the farm, Walter. Lots of folks have to face that. The nursing home's not going to be so bad. Really, Walter. And I'll know you're getting good care." The old man reached with his other hand and held fast. "I miss the farm awful bad, Ada. I could get my strength back at the farm." "The doctor said it's going to be a long, slow process, Walter. You can't afford to live and nurse. Those bills have drawn you down too bad. No, we've already talked about that, Walter." And then she said goodbye. She had to catch a plane back to Missouri. Cloyd sat a while with the old man. "What's going to happen to the farm?" he asked. "Have to sell it to pay my board at the nursing home. But now, let's change the subject. Tell me what you did today." So right now, Walter and his sisters are discussing because Walter is going to be moving into a nursing home. He can no longer keep up the farm. He's getting too old to do all that work. So they decided that Walter was going to move into a nursing home. The reading teacher was talking, and Cloyd wasn't even listening to her. He was thinking about Walter, about how he was getting worse instead of better. Pretty soon they would move him out of the hospital, and then he would wither away. It wouldn't take long. If he couldn't get back to his farm, he was going to wither away. "Cloyd, I thought you wanted to work with me," the teacher said. "I'm sorry, I was thinking." It came to him in the group home when all the kids were watching television, and he was looking at it but not seeing anything. The next day, in front of the school, Cloyd asked around among the bus drivers and found the one who came in from the east, a blurry man in a grease-stained overalls. "Does your bus come in from the Pedora?" he asked the driver. The man shook his head. "Not nearly. Starts this side of Bayfield." The boy's disappointment showed. "How come you're asking?" the driver asked. "I need to come into school from there." "Oh, whereabouts?" Top of page 146. "Whereabouts?" "A farm north of the highway." "Ain't that the Landis place?" "You know him?" "I live out that way." "You must be the kid that helped him out in the summer." "Hey, I heard about you." "Name's Wilson," he said, extending his grimy hands. "Wilson Webb. 'Scuse the grease. I worked at the garage in between driving the bus." "You see, I drive my pickup over to Bayfield and park it where the bus run starts. I'd be happy to bring you in from the Pedora, if that's what you're asking. Wouldn't mind the company a bit." Cloyd hurried back to the group home to tell his house mother. She wasn't there. He went to his room. A boy he'd never met before was unpacking a duffel bag and hanging up his clothes in Cloyd's closet. An army cot was set up between the beds. After a long moment of surprise, Cloyd asked him what was going on. The boy shrugged. "Heard somebody was moving out. You, I guess." I didn't hear anything about it." Cloyd fretted a while in the living room, then saw Susan James driving up in the van and hurried out to see her. He stood quietly on the lawn and tried to read her face as she was walking up. She knew something important. "Have I got some news for you, Cloyd?" she said excitedly. Cloyd held his breath. He was always afraid of things dropping on him like this. "The tribe says you can come home now, Cloyd." "Home?" he mumbled. "White Mesa. They called this morning, Cloyd, and said everything looks a lot better at home." "So?" "How do you mean?" he said guardedly. "Well, the tribe heard about how hard you've been trying. They want to give you another chance at going to school right there in the Blanding. Your grandmother's new job is working out, and your sister's on her way back from Salt Lake. Maybe your grandmother will get her goats back. Everybody's ready for you to come home, Cloyd." He didn't know what to say. It was everything he had hoped for all winter. "When?" he asked blankly. "Right away. Well, tomorrow morning. Did you meet Charlie in your room?" Cloyd nodded. "Sorry about that. When the people down at Tawak heard about the vacancy, they sent Charlie up even though they were supposed to wait until tomorrow. But you know, there's a waiting list, and they've been desperately trying to find him a place for him. Why don't we go over to the hospital so you can say goodbye to Walter?" Say goodbye to Walter? How could he do that? He asked himself when the old man was slipping downhill. If he deserted Walter now, as much as he wanted to go back to White Mesa, it wouldn't be right. It was his turn to pay back some of what he'd been given. "I can't go now," he told her. "Maybe after winter." "Why not?" "Walter needs me. He can't go back to the farm unless someone's there to do the chores and take care of." "But that's all arranged for him to go to the nursing home as soon as he'll die there," Cloyd declared. "He started to die now." She knew as much from visiting Walter herself. She'd been worried terribly for him, knowing how badly he'd missed his farm. He'd been there so long he was like an old tree too deeply rooted for transplanting. "Tell me how it would all work, Cloyd. I guess you've got this all figured out." Cloyd told her about the bus driver. He told her she'd have to get permission from the tribe for him to leave the group home and live with Walter. "And permission from 2 school districts," she added. "You'd be out of boundaries." "I don't know, Cloyd. It all sounds pretty tricky to me. I don't have any idea if the tribe would ever allow something like that. But then again, they might be able to see what kind of sacrifice you'd be making and why. Are you really sure about it yourself?" Before he could answer, she told him, "Take a long walk and really think it over. Here's your chance to go home, Cloyd. Then come back and let me know what you've decided. If you want to stay with Walter until he's better, I'll do my best to make it happen." Cloyd walked down to the river to think, crouched on the bank, and turned it all over in his mind. He saw himself standing at the door of the hospital room, discovering the shell of his father hooked up to a machine, and realized finally he didn't have a father. He saw himself finding the Bearstone and killing the peach trees and following the old man up the Pine River to the mine. He saw himself standing alone atop of the Rio Grande Pyramid and realizing a father had come into his life after all. He remembered the look in Blue Boy's eyes right before he tumbled down the mountain, and he recalled the bear. He'd never forget the bear. The hurt you got over makes you stronger. It was all moving in a direction, he decided, making a pattern. And he had to know where it was all leading. If he went home now, he'd never know. It was all part of learning what it meant to live in a good way. And that is the end of chapter 21. So at the end there, Cloyd was discussing with Susan James that he wants to stay with Walter and care for him at the farm because he knows Walter will probably end up dying if he goes to the nursing home. And also at the end of the book, Cloyd was talking about Walter and how Walter makes him feel like he's kind of part of his family. Like Walter is Cloyd's dad. That's how he makes him feel. So let's go back and answer our 3 questions. So what do you think Cloyd gave Walter, why do you think Cloyd gave Walter the Bearstone? So why did Cloyd give Walter the Bearstone? You can also look on page 143. And then number 2, where are the 2 places Cloyd can choose to live? So think about the options Cloyd had, where he can live and who he could live with. And then number 3, how did Cloyd view Walter? Page 149. So check back tomorrow for the last chapter, chapter 22. And then on Wednesday, we will be reviewing the entire book for our exam on Thursday.